Well, hello. This is Suzanne Hannafin with Acumen Executive Search, and I'm here with my lovely, lovely co-host, Tanis Morris.
Hello.
And I am so excited today to have a really dear friend of mine joining us. And I'm going to read your bio, which normally I don't read bios, but because Laura Salerno Owens is such a badass, I wanted to make sure I got this right. So Laura is the president of Markowitz Herbold and a shareholder at the Oregon's largest litigation firm. She is the chair of the firm's employee practice group and represents employers and executives in hundreds of high-stake employment issues. Laura also practices general business litigation and is on the member of the firm's Bet the Company practice group, which I'm not quite sure what that is.
You don't want to know.
Okay.
You don't want to be in a situation where you have to bet your company, but if you are, that's when you come to us.
There we go. Yeah. Now I understand. But Laura has been recognized and with all of her achievements, including the Oregon Commission for Women as a 2021 Women of Accomplishment honoree. She's been recognized by the Chamber USA for labor and employment and commercial litigation, Best Lawyers in America, named a super lawyer by Oregon Super Lawyers, which is recognized by Law Dragon as one of the top civil rights and plaintiff employment lawyers in the United States, honored at the U of O, University of Oregon School of Law as an outstanding young alum in 2016, selected by the Portland Business Journal as 40 under 40, Women of Influence, and their parent company, the Business Journals, also recognized Laura as one of the top 100 legal influencers in the United States. Did I not mention she's a badass? So I am so excited to have you here with us, Laura. So thank you. But we would love to kind of hear your journey and how did you get where you are today?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me. As Suzanne mentioned, we've been friends for years, and I'm just so excited to see what you've done, not only with Acumen, but with this podcast. And I just love so much this idea of reaching out and hearing from people and building community that is completely tracks with all my values. So I'm really excited to be here. To answer your question, it's one of those things that very often I'll get emails or phone calls from, first-year law students. Can we go out? Tell me about your path. Tell me about your career. And I'm always happy to do it, but I'm worried they're going to be a little disappointed in the answer, because I actually, not only did I not think my entire life, I'm going to be a lawyer one day, but I was pretty sure that if I was going to do anything, I definitely wouldn't be a lawyer. It seemed boring, and in full disclosure, my mom, I was raised by a single mom in Los Angeles with my two sisters. My mom was a legal secretary in a litigation firm, and she just thought lawyers were terrible people, And in fact, when I told her that I wanted to go to law school, she looked at me and she said, "Oh, Laura, you're so talented. Why would you become a lawyer?" So it was not a linear path. And in fact, my first job out of college, I went to UCLA. So I stayed local. And my first job out of school is I was an event planner. Mm-hmm. And, sort of my claim to fame, I might age myself, but I planned a bat mitzvah where the Olsen twins were there.
Oh, my God. We're throwing out the script.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so, that's where I started. I wanted to be an event planner, but it's really interesting, being on the other side of it, now practicing law. Some of the lessons I learned from being an event planner are really applicable to being a lawyer. You have multiple clients, and for any given client, whether it's their event, their quinceañera, their bat mitzvah, their wedding, their conference, it is their most important thing. And while on a high level, they're cognizant that there are other people who use your services, they don't really care. They want their event to go well. And likewise, when you're working with clients as a lawyer, I think that client service piece is huge. I think a lot of lawyers forget that we're in the service industry, and we are here to make sure our clients get their needs met. So even though it may not seem like a direct correlation, event planner to lawyer, there's been a lot of overlap. So I was
and I'm gonna throw in there. It's not only do clients think, of course, I one of them. My issue is the biggest issue, or my party is the best, or what have you. But there's also a coordination I mean, good God, I put on a dinner for 8 people and I'm planning 2 weeks ahead of time. Yeah.
Absolutely. With litigation or with event planning, you have to think about what could go wrong day of, what's going to happen that you didn't plan for, and then how are you going to react? And I think that's a huge quality I look for even in leaders and other people. Are you a Chicken Little? Are you a person who just runs around with your head cut off and blames everyone else? Or are you a problem solver? Do you take the issue that came before and say, okay, wasn't expecting that. We're going to pivot and here's what we're going to do. And that ability, that skill to pivot, to keep moving forward and to stay positive is so important. And especially when you're doing high stakes litigation, you cannot anticipate what's going to happen. The thing that you didn't plan for will happen, and you just have to have those skills to react.
Absolutely. And I kind of interrupted your story. So what made you decide to go to law school? What was the formative
Well,
piece?
it's funny because this is a whole thing about leadership and, bosses and whatnot. But, that old saying, people don't leave jobs, they leave managers.
Oh.
I had a bad boss. And I should thank her every day because it set me on such a great path. Mm-hmm. She was a total micromanager. I just, I didn't like it. And so I wanted to do something where I thought to myself, if at the end of the day, what's a job I could do where I could be my own boss if I wanted? And, it was a very intensive thought process. I was like, well, I'm not great at math and science and, I like to argue, so maybe I'll go to law school. That was pretty much the extent of it. So then I applied to law schools and it came down to, I was choosing between the University of Oregon and a law school in California, where I'm from. And then I went to visit the campuses. And at U of O, there was just this environment of people seemed more relaxed. And the other place I went to, people seemed so on edge and so competitive. And I thought, law school's gonna be hard enough unto itself. I don't need to be in an environment with a bunch of piranhas. I wanna be in a place that seemed more collaborative. And that's kind of been a through line through my career. I don't mind working hard. I don't mind doing the high stakes, stressful things, but I wanna do it with a team. I don't wanna do it alone. And so even in choosing my law schools and choosing my community, that was kind of the first step. And then when I finished law school, was I going to go back to California or stay in Oregon? I had just made such a community here in Oregon. And that is one of the things I appreciate the most about working here in Oregon is we are generally very collaborative, very collegial, and I really appreciate that.
And you went first into employment and labor law before really, well, I guess you're still labor and employment, but more traditional than litigation. How did you go from make that move?
Well, interestingly enough, and this is a little known fact, my very first job that I was hired for was to be a bond lawyer.
Oh, wow.
And
Wow.
which is a very niche area.
Yeah.
And it just so happened, and this is why I tell people when I meet with the law students or whatnot, don't think you can plan your life, right? Mm-hmm. Respond to opportunities as they present themselves. So I was hired to be a bond lawyer to help cities and municipalities get bonds to, build projects and whatnot. But within my firm, I was at one of the largest firms in the country at the time. We had a litigation department, and the litigators in the litigation department didn't care for employment law. They wanted to do antitrust. They wanted to do the really complicated commercial litigation. Employment law to them was very nebulous, involved people,
Yeah.
And I love that. And so, someone walked down to my office and said, hey, I have this employment case. Do you want to handle it? And I said, yes. For many years at the beginning of my career, my default was default to yes. It's interesting because now that I'm older and I have children, I have other things, I try to default to no. But at the beginning of my career, I would default to yes. And that opened so many opportunities for me. And so I said, sure, I'll take that employment case. And then I discovered, oh, this is amazing. It is essentially people. That's all it is. It's people. It's relationships. It's someone doesn't feel heard. Someone feels misunderstood. And that I understand. Whether the wholly owned subsidiary of some big corporation, I can also do that, but that requires more of a stretch. And then for me, what I enjoy about that is when you're focused on the relationships, when you're focused on people, you can draw from so many experiences you have in your life and you can get really creative. And it's such a joy. I really like it.
I love that. It's so interesting hearing, we've had the opportunity to meet with a number of corporate leaders over the year that we've been doing this podcast. And everybody has these interesting pivots, and I find them just fascinating. I would never have expected that that's where you started. And then I love how you ended there. What other formative experiences have you gone through that have really shaped kind of the ethos that you bring to your practice and to your role as a leader?
I think it all comes down to this idea that it's all about relationships. Mm-hmm. Anything that you do is about the relationships that you build. Mm-hmm. And I also think that it's interesting that being a leader is not about having a title. It's about an energy that you bring to something. And so you have opportunities throughout your career to be a leader. And so when I was a brand new lawyer, I had no idea what was going on. I mean, they call it the practice of law for a reason. You have to practice it mm-hmm. to understand it. And so I wanted to operate in a space where I felt more competent. And so I immediately started volunteering to coach a mock trial team at a high school, at Jefferson High School, right around the corner from here. And that was such a great formative experience because at a very young age, very early in my career, I was able to, teach these high school students. I didn't know everything about the law, but I knew a little more than they did. When it went from the high schoolers, I was up here. And what it did is it gave me a sense of confidence and competence, which then carried over into my everyday work. And I made relationships with, judges in town because they would allow us to use their courtrooms to practice. And then that kind of, stumbled into another opportunity when I came back from my first maternity leave, actually my second maternity leave. I felt really underwater. I was now a partner. My firm made me an equity partner at my law firm when I was on maternity leave. And I came back, I had 2 little kids under the age of 2. I was an equity partner, and I looked around the room to see who else in the legal field was doing what I was trying to do. I was still striving, right? Yes, I'd made partner, but I wanted more. I wanted to be a major rainmaker at my firm. I wanted to get the best, biggest cases. And I had these 2 little kids. What did that look like? And so I looked around the legal field and I didn't see my peers I had gone to law school with. A lot of them had either stopped practicing or maybe had gone more in-house. They weren't on the same path I was on. And then that led to me calling up Suzanne and Alice Tang and other people. And we formed this group called LEAP, leaders and entrepreneurs across professions, which now is 7 years strong, with 100. Yeah, I know, because I look at how old is Mateo. So it's been 7 years that we've had LEAP, a 100-member group with all of these executives and women. And the whole idea was, I am looking for support. I'm looking for guidance. I'm looking for examples. I don't see it immediately in front of me. So I created this group, out of whole cloth in some ways. But again, no one had appointed me a leader. I just kind of did it. And then I think the most formative experience I've had as a leader was leading my firm during COVID. Mm-hmm. And certainly I did not do that alone. We have an entire management team. But by that point, I had the official title. I was firm president. I became the president of the firm in July of 2019.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
Right before, of course, we signed a 10-year lease for Class A commercial space in downtown Portland. Our office is beautiful. You should come see it.
Yes, I think it's known as the Marble Palace.
It's gorgeous. And, fortunately, my managing partner at the time, this woman, Anna Joyce, who's now a Court of Appeals judge, amazing leader. I was able to work with her, with the other shareholders. But one of the things that we started doing out of that was we used a very old-fashioned tool. It's called the telephone. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but we literally had a phone log, and we would divide it up with all of the shareholders of the firm, and we would call every single employee in our firm, just call them, and just say, how's it going? Yeah. How can we help you? What's happening? And I think that led to just a base level trust and genuine show of care, which then transferred into bigger questions of when, I'm going to use air quotes, COVID was over, questions about what do we do about coming back to the office? A lot of our competitor colleague firms put in mandates. You must be in the office 3 days a week. You must be in these days. And we really sat back and thought hard about it and had a lot of conversations, but we landed in a spot of, we have amazing employees. We had built a really good level of trust. We performed really well throughout the pandemic. And so we don't have a mandate. We give people a lot of flexibility to figure out when they want to do their work, where they want to do their work. There are guidelines, but there are no mandates. So that's just some examples of how, you think like, oh, okay, I'm going to wait until I'm an official leader and then do the things. But leadership opportunities just come up all sorts of places. I think it's the energy that you bring to a situation.
Absolutely. And you know what I find interesting, and there's two things that I wanted to, listening, that I want to bring up. One is about balance. Because balance, as you were talking about, there was no peers striving and being at that same level with balancing. I mean, we're all women here. We're all moms. We're all wives. We're all, we've got the girlfriends and friends. Being a litigator, that's a big responsibility. How are you balancing, and what advice would you give?
I would say a couple of things on that, because that's obviously a question that's been front and center for me my entire career. First is, I think balance is not a useful word, or if it is, I think you have to look at it more broadly. So I used to think about balance as being a scale, and every single day that scale had to be even, right? It had to be a perfect mix of work, personal life, whatever it was. And one piece of advice I got is, well, think of it more holistically. Think in the month. Mm-hmm. Maybe you have 4 days in a row where you're just working like crazy. But then later in the month, 4 days where you're doing a lot of personal stuff. And so maybe holistically over the month, that's the balance. That was very helpful. But I think even now, the term I prefer is work-life integration. And that for me, in fact, Suzanne, I think you're very good at that. And I think of you as a personal role model when I think about that, is it's all in the soup. And it's like, we're a whole person, and yes, I have 2 children, and yes, I have this practice, and I have friends, and in theory, on occasion, I want to exercise, and like all the things, and it's all fine. I think we have to try as much as possible to get rid of the guilt of, if I'm not being productive in this moment, then I don't have value. And I think that for me has been a bigger shift of decoupling my sense of value as a person from my achievements. For a very long time, I felt like I only had value if I achieved something. And to tell myself and to honestly believe that if I have a day where I wake up and I do 20 things in a day, where I have lots of days like that, and then I have a day where I wake up and I don't get anything done that day, at the end of each of those days, my value as a person has not changed.
Absolutely.
Well, you're blowing my mind. Have you gotten there? I mean, that's a hard thing to get to. I'm sure. Well, and we all are. At least what you were saying really resonates with me.
Oh,
just
absolutely.
as a woman and as a human being, I guess I feel like I'm always trying to get all the things on my list done, and I don't know, how do you get to the point where you're like copacetic with the ideals you just set forth?
So it's a lot of things. I think you have to be really mindful about it. I think you have to surround yourself with other people who are at various stages of their career. I think it's really important to have friends who are younger than you are, so you can kind of see vestiges of yourself, and people who are older than you are who can give you some perspective. I think of Jerry Verera. Jerry gave me great perspective on various things. Alice, of course. But I also think, honestly, a lot of it has been my kids. I look at my daughter, Gianna, and you want to talk about a badass. She is 9 years old, and she has this fire inside her, and she's had it ever since she was born. So for her, it's very easy for me to say, if Gianna decides, let's say, to become a lawyer and is a great lawyer, is she now a badass because she was a great lawyer? No, she was born that way. She has that thing inside her. And so for me, if tomorrow I'm no longer the president of Markowitz Herbold, now am I no longer a worthy person? Am I no longer that person who has that fire in her? Am I no longer this like goddess warrior? No, yes, it's great that I'm the president of Markowitz Herbold, but I am who I am, and I was that person before Markowitz, and I'll be that person after. So I think it's having the perspective of being able to see it in other people, whether it's our friends, our children, because it's harder to see it in ourselves.
Absolutely. And that's such a great segue that we all come with these core values. And it's how do we show up? But yet, more importantly, being a podcast on leadership, it's how do we put it out there and how do we manage and lead? What are some of those core values that you hold dear, and how do you operationalize those?
An absolute value, not just of me, but my firm, which is why I think I've been so happy there, is this abundance mentality. It is so important, this idea that if someone else's star is shining brightly, it does not diminish your own. In fact, it makes your star brighter. And actually, that's an example I think that has been set not only in word, but in action by Dave Markowitz. So Dave Markowitz is the co-founder of my firm, and he founded my firm with a woman named Barry Herbold, total trailblazer. And, and unfortunately, Barry has passed away, but Dave has an entire program where he coaches other attorneys in the firm on how to get out there, how to be rainmakers, how to be better lawyers. He gives all these classes on how to make other lawyers, talented, taking depositions. And, sometimes people will ask him, why are you giving away your secrets? And I love his answer. He's like, because no one can do me as well as me. Like, okay, Dave, but it's true in a way. I mean, this idea that, you really want to lift those up around you. And something I really like about my firm is that we try not to have the Superman model. There can only be one, Laura Salerno Owens, and that's it. No, it's the Avengers model, right? We all have our power. And, think about like if you've ever watched those movies with your kids, as cheesy as they are, you get the goosebumps when they're on the battlefield and they say, Avengers, unite, or whatever it is, and everyone comes in and they all have their superpower and Black Widow's over here, And I love that. I love that idea of surrounding yourselves with people who no one person has every power, but everyone has their own superpower. And so how do you operationalize that, right? So we try to have in our workplace a place that is, the foundation is respect. We have a very flat hierarchy. And so in our client meetings, we have something that we call, for our firm, it's the positive litigation experience. And our clients laugh at us when we say that. They're like, I'm being sued. What is positive about that? Or I'm suing someone. And we say, yes, but this is the experience you're going to have is the positive litigation experience. And part of that is you're going to be part of this team where it's the client and their ideas, it's the lawyers, but it's also our paralegals. We have some of the most amazing paralegals in the business. It's the production assistants. It's everyone. And we just want to know, what do you think about this? What's your idea? What's your perspective? Because again, if you have sort of an Avengers mindset, right, where everyone has something to contribute and not this like Superman mindset, you're more open to getting those ideas. And I think that's why my firm, although we are a boutique firm just in Portland, Oregon, we are able to compete with some of the biggest international firms in the market because we draw on the strengths of everyone in our firm.
Yeah, I love that. And then it's not just what's happening in your firm, it's outside in the community. And I know Markowitz does a lot on community and building up the community. Again, taking that abundance mentality, how do you push it out to the community?
Well, one of the things I love about what my firm does in the community is that we basically empower everyone in our firm, from shareholders to associates to paralegals to staff, whomever. What is your passion, and pursue that? So, for example, one of our paralegals, Greg Scott, was the president of Monsanto's, the hiking group, because that's a passion that he has. And if they ever want to have meetings in our offices, they too can come to the Marble Palace. And, we create time for that. And Greg has taken some of the lessons that he has learned from climbing and actually done in all firm presentations, things about like, before you do a climb, you kind of check in with everyone in the group. Energetically, where are you? Red, yellow, green. And then that idea that we can do that with our teams of just checking in, acknowledging that you're not going to be green every single day. And that's okay. You can have different energy levels, different things going on. We're just going to check in with each other and know where we are. So that's one example on how this community work helps inform our day-to-day work. Or we have another associate, April Stone. She's really involved with Special Olympics. It's a passion she has. And that has actually parlayed into her doing some work. She's represented some Olympic athletes. It's really cool. And so again, it's this abundance idea of some firms, I think, have the mentality, I don't want my people leaving their desks. We bill in 6-minute increments, time out the door, that's money gone. But we very much believe if we invest in our community, it is both the most selfless and selfish thing you can do, because the more you give out, the more you get back. It's just true.
Well, and you talked about this, I'm going to kind of jump on this 6-minute billing increment, because I think COVID, especially the lawyers I know, and I'm married to one, that there is this idea that the secretary or admin or paralegal sits right outside of the office, you are in. And again, that paradigm of the integration is, I think law firms have changed probably more than anybody else of understanding that you don't have to be at your desk. Is that a true statement?
Absolutely. COVID for me was, I have just a general saying in life that anything that happens presents a gift or an opportunity. Anything. And COVID certainly was that. There were gifts and there were opportunities and there were all sorts of things. But I think one of the greatest opportunities from it is in the legal field in particular, a common refrain is, we can't do it this way. We've always done it that way. So for example, doing a filing. Of course you have to be in the office. We have a filing, but during COVID we couldn't. We all had to do it remotely. And it shattered it, And so for me, it became kind of a signal. Anytime someone says, well, you can't do it that way because we never have, COVID gave a real testing ground. Well, let's test that. Is that true? And so I just think it's been a huge opportunity to give people more autonomy, because I think that is the number one key of satisfaction at work. They've done a lot of studies, and autonomy is number one. Mm-hmm. And so if our legal assistants, for example, our policy is they need to be in the office physically 4 days in the month, but they can choose what 4 days those are. So if they want to do 4 days one week and then work remotely the rest of the month, fine, one each day. That will change if we're in trial or deposition. But as a general matter, they have the autonomy to decide which days they're going to come in, because they're professionals and we trust them. And I think that giving someone trust, you get the trust back.
It sounds like such an amazing culture. It's really interesting. And now as the president of the organization, I guess I'll back it up and say with executive search, we firmly believe that the only way a candidate is going to be successful when they join a new team is if they, in addition to possessing the skill set and experience necessary for the job, they also align culturally with the organization. So when you're looking for new team members, when you're building teams, what kind of qualities are you looking for that is going to, probably indicate that they'll be a good fit and a successful match for the organization? And then what about just for you personally, when you're looking for people to join your immediate team, what are the skill sets you're looking for?
It's a great question, because I think anyone who is a business owner knows that hiring is one of the most difficult things to do. We've all had that experience where someone gave the most amazing interview and then they get in there and you've had other people who maybe gave okay interviews and then they are total rock stars. So it's hard to know. So with that caveat, I'm a lawyer, I have to put my caveats out there. I would say it's a couple things. So obviously there are certain core things that people have to work at our firm. You have to be incredibly intelligent. You have to work hard, all those things. So, and that's kind of a given. But I would say to the extent that you can suss it out, it is that abundance mentality. Is this the type of person who is going to come in and think that everyone within the team they're competing with? And it's such a fine line, because as litigators, we are competitive. Don't get me wrong, I love to win, but I want to win as a group. And so it's hard to assess, but what we are looking for is somebody who wants to win, but wants to win not by demeaning the people around them, but by making everyone around them better, who has an abundance mentality, not a scarcity mentality. So I would say that's kind of the first key of just generally when we're hiring people, we look for someone who also, to that end, is comfortable with the fact that we are sort of a flat organization. On our hiring committee, we have paralegals making screening decisions as to associate attorneys. And if we have some associate who's like, this paralegal is going to make a decision about me, you're not in the right place, you know? And then for my immediate team, it has to be someone who has a great sense of humor because when you do employment law, it can be a little, or just even just the high stakes litigation that we do, you must need a little gallows humor. You know what I mean? Like, you're going to take your bumps. It's a hard job. And if you're not the type of person who can just laugh at yourself once in a while, I think it's just going to be a lot harder. So that's what I look for people on my immediate team, people who have a good sense of humor, who are introspective and kind of understand that sometimes you just have to laugh at the situation.
Oh, humor and laughter. You have kids. It's the only way to survive children. But looking back, I mean, here you are. You're kind of at the pinnacle of your career. You're so successful. You're very well known. You're amazing. Looking back, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self or even high school-year-old self?
I think it's to get to the point faster that we were talking about earlier of really understanding your value. Knowing that your value is not contingent on your achievements. And that assuredness, that tranquility would have saved me so much heartache. And in some ways people might say, and even at times I've said to myself, but that's what propelled me, right? Because I was always working really hard and, being competitive and, trying to outwork the person next to me. And you can still do all of that. But I think it's a question of look at what's motivating you. And there's always within us two different types of energy. There's energy that fills you up, sage energy. It's like when you're being innovative, when you're in flow, like we all know that feeling. And then there's energy that drains you. It's the anxiety. It's the fear. It's like, oh my God, what are they going to say? Oh, I'm going to miss this deadline. What if they don't like me? Da, da, da. And while at the end of the day, it might appear on the outside that the same achievement has occurred, what does your body feel like? What did it cost you to achieve that? And I wish I had known at a younger age to tap more into that sage energy, that fulfilling, self-renewing, beautiful light that fills your cup versus that energy that sucks you dry. And yeah, you get there, but you're kind of a shell of a person once you do. You're so exhausted, you're so spent. So I would say that would be the biggest difference is just at a younger age, understanding more thoroughly that who you are and your value is not contingent on what you achieve.
I love that because, again, we hear today a lot about imposter syndrome. Mm-hmm. We hear today about, again, we question not just our judgment and our decisions, but we also question who we are. Mm-hmm. And I think that's such an important lesson to remember. You are who you are and to embrace it and not try to change it.
It's a really good trick to help with that is to find a photo of yourself under the age of 10.
Ooh.
And I think we can all picture it. There's one, for me, it's a photo when I'm about maybe 7. I have a very sunburnt nose. I was like a total towhead blonde. And I was like, like this like little gremlin smile. And in that photo, I'm like, yep, that's me.
Yeah.
In that picture, kind of my essential self is shining through.
Yeah.
And I think all of us can, if we sit here, can think of that photo or that image, that thing of our essential self. And it might sound cheesy, but sometimes just pulling it out and looking at that photo, the type of work I do is extremely stressful. I have people on the other side who want to cast aspersions about me, who threaten to sue me in addition to my clients. It is a constant assault. And to be able to just recenter and know who you are and what your value is, I think is incredibly powerful. And then it allows you to be generous with other people. And then you build this team. And then when you have a team full of people who are not operating out of fear, who are not operating out of imposter syndrome, out of trying to cut each other down, but all want to make each other stronger, then you get to be a team like Markowitz Herbold. And it's amazing. Extremely formidable.
Wow. Honestly, I just thought of another question when you were saying that because I was so moved. What are other characteristics to you of a great leader?
It's humility is not quite the right word. It's the that fine balance between allowing you to make a mistake, but holding you accountable for it. It's a hard balance, but it's a good one. If people on your team feel they cannot make mistakes, that's fatal. It's absolutely fatal. But of course, on the other hand, you don't want to have people making mistakes left and right because, we have to get the job done. So a great leader, I think, is someone who can turn things into teaching opportunities and give you grace. And again, not sound like a total sycophant, but Dave Markowitz is really good at that. You'll miss something in litigation. You'll make a mistake, and he never berates you. And I've worked for other people in the past who you make a mistake, and they will say things to you like, how could you make this mistake? This is embarrassing. This is horrible. We're going to lose the client. You're going to be sued for malpractice. I mean, they just lay into you, and that is so unproductive. Whereas he will say, okay, well, we're going to fix this. And then it's a learning opportunity. Yeah. So I think that's another great quality. And I think also a great quality of the leaders that I admire is authenticity. I don't do well with these people who are perfect people. I can't. I don't have time for it. We all know it's BS anyway.
She's looking at me, and I am perfect. I just thought I'd throw that out.
Suzanne Hannafin, you are perfect. Yeah. But I think authenticity is really important.
Well, thanks. I'm sorry.
No, that's perfect because
so
this. Yeah, and this podcast is called Hiring for Good. So, really, what does hiring for good mean to you?
To me, it means hiring sort of for the right reasons because you're doing something for the right reason, right? So for example, at my firm, we do litigation. And some people, if they're being really cynical, could say litigation's all about lawyers trying to make money off their clients. They're trying to milk the file. They're just about making money. They don't care about their clients. That is the wrong reason. And so if you were hiring people to further that purpose, that'd be hiring for bad, right? Hiring for good is, at our firm, we're trying to solve problems. And we're trying to solve problems in an efficient way, in the most low-cost way. And we have some incredible clients. We do a lot of work for the state of Oregon, and I have so much pride for that. I love representing our state. I love representing our governor. And that, to me, is like the hiring for good, right? Like it's this higher purpose. Why are we doing this work? What is it about? And then finding people who are like-minded.
I love that.
I do too. Thank you. It was such a pleasure. My gosh, what a great interview.
Oh, I know it. And I was right. Badass.
Yes.
Right there. Laura, thank you so much again. Laura Salerno Owens, Markowitz Herbold. I cannot thank you enough.
Well, thank you both. It was really great to be here.
Awesome.
Great.
Thanks for joining us today at Hiring for Good. If you were inspired by our conversation, don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you want to learn more about our executive search services, check us out at www.hiringforgood.net or our company website, Acumen Executive Search.
Thanks so much, and don't forget to join us next time for another in-depth conversation about transformational leadership. Until then, have fun.